Shattered Pieces by Orpheus Kidwell, Chapter 11, Burdens. Zabuza, do you think we're a little too close to the ground? Suigetsu couldn't help but to ask as he looked down upon the sea of black and white below them. The loading ramp of the ship was lowered in preparation for Hidan, mostly as a countermeasure to him ripping a hole in the bulkhead due to impatience. Zabuza looked at the grim nest and shrugged. The only thing we have to worry about are Nevermore or some sort of Draco-type grim. We should be fine unless the latter shows up. Really? Suigetsu swallowed, thinking it might be better not to mention that it was just such a grim that knocked down their ship. So when they arrived in, feeling a shift in the aircraft as Hidan no doubt switched it to autopilot. The swordsman turned away from the hatch. Let's head back up before he gets here. It won't do anyone any good if he bumps into you and you fall out. Suigetsu nodded his head and followed after the man. It seemed that Zabuza wasn't out of place in his suggestion as Hidan came barreling through the cargo hold with the most deranged grin either had ever seen on his face. Hugging the walls to allow him passage, they watched as the acolyte jumped off the ramp, scythe in hand, and yelling something that was half scream, half hymn in Naruto's name. I swear, I'll never get used to that, man, Zabuza commented with a sigh as he headed up to the cockpit. Suigetsu took the seat next to him. Flipping a few switches and turning a few dials, he watched as the navigation computer lit up. Alright, luckily for us, those puppet boys modified this thing just in time for an extermination run. Pressing a yellow button on the console, Zabuza grinned as he felt something wire from beneath the wings. What did they add? Suigetsu wondered. Toys, the best toys a huntsman could ever ask for. That was when the automatic fire started. At the time, Anson Suigetsu could never be sure whether it was Hidan or Zabuza who had the more deranged smile. The coven. Cinder and her assistants didn't know what Salem was witnessing, but she looked halfway between orgasm and outrage. None dared speak up for fear of what she might do, but none needed, for she was the one to speak. Yes, I think the boy would do nicely. With a wave of Salem's hand, a new chair popped up at the table. Cinder widened her eyes, knowing what her boss was implying. Implications were thrown out the window as the grim-like entity rose gracefully. The boy, he is so young, so fragile, so broken. I can see what he fears, what he wants, what he hates. He has ambition, just like the others. He has weaknesses, just like all of you humans. More than that, he has strength. He has more strength than I have seen in such a long time. His followers turn to him and his strength, but do good but not admonish him for his weaknesses. Still, I do so hope that girl of yours is as good as you imply, Cinder. I will have him one way or another. He entices me in a way I didn't expect to be. That seat there, it will be reserved for when he is ready, whether he's willing or not. Do not disappoint me. Cinder nodded, bowing her head to the woman. Of course, it shall be as you say. Turning away from the trio, Salem left the coven's meeting room, leaving them alone. What was that all about? Mercury wondered with a sigh. Emerald shrugged, but it was Cinder who spoke. It seems that she's taken more of an interest in Naruto than I thought possible. She paused before shaking her head. No, that's not quite right. She's taken an interest in what he represents and the potential his group has. That boy, whether he knows it or not, will be unable to just sit back and follow Adam. We have a mission, it seems. We must first ensure that he falls for the girl and then have her lead him down the road she wishes him to. You got all that from what she said? Emerald asked. I thought she was just being cryptic like usual. Cinder looked at her followers and realized she had much to teach them still. They were children after all, children trying to play an adult's game, just like Naruto. Unfortunately for him, the rules were never meant to be fair, and he was never meant to be left alone. It was quite impossible with all the power he was throwing around. The next few months would certainly be interesting, if nothing else. Naruto's soulscape triumvirate. Yami watched in interest as Kurama disappeared and Naruto appeared within the soulscape, the shared area of their metaphorical embodiments. The particular part they inhabited currently was a comfortable sized room with 3 chairs facing the center. Yami sat in what appeared to be a high-backed chair of wood with a purple cushion and oak armrests. Kurama had been sitting in what appeared to be a throne of oak stained red with red cushions. The last seat was empty until Naruto arrived, but was a simple office chair. In between the seats was a very large and round table. It seems Kurama was waiting just for something like this. It's been so long since we encountered a proper nest. Naruto looked at Yami with a smile and nodded. I know he was getting antsy, but I haven't had a proper chance to let him out with all the responsibilities in Mount Glen. Yami was silent, thinking about what he said. Is there something wrong, Yami? You seem more quiet than usual. The purple-eyed doppelganger of the original sighed and shook his head. There's something I need to show you. Kurama is fighting, so we don't need to watch him right now. He'll take care of himself and the others as well as either of us could. Naruto didn't quite get what Yami was going on to show him, but nodded and followed anyways. As the two stood, the table and chairs disappeared. The room they sat in was then illuminated. It was circular with 12 doors set up in position like the hours of a clock, all shut tightly. Yami led Naruto to one with the number 5 on it. You already know that our soul is, so far as we can tell, rather strange, Yami commented as they stopped before it. At Naruto's nod, Yami continued, giving Kurama is mostly over in the first corridor to train against past enemies, and you have control over the supermajority of the time. I've been exploring the 12 corridors and trying to map out our soulscape. Yeah, I know that. The fourth corridor contains our memories and we can relive them in there. Or as Kurma does, we can interact with shards of our memories. He uses it to practice while he's in here. The second corridor is our subconscious and contains our dreams, aspirations, and fears. The third corridor is where the parts of people's aura we take that contains their semblance is sorted and appears as a sort of library so we can categorize and keep track of them. Yami nodded. Correct. The fourth corridor is similar to the third. It contains the memories of the souls we've taken. To end that category, we've got the fifth corridor. That is what I wanted to show you. Turning the doorknob on the fifth door, Yami stepped aside as Naruto could look within. At first, he wasn't sure what he was looking at. It just appeared to be a shifting mass of gray against the gray background. His eyes adjusted, however. He looked at Yami in surprise. If our fourth corridor is the past, our second is the future, our third is the power, and our fourth is knowledge, then this is Asphodel, Ayami exclaimed. I remember reading about it in one of the books on religion from before the Grimm showed up. They said that those who never accomplished greatness nor were particularly malevolent ended up in a place called the Fields of Asphodel after they died. Their souls simply wandered aimlessly for eternity, forgetting everything about their original life as the years ticked on. I think this is what happens to the souls we absorb. They don't disappear into ours. They stay in here and wander. They aren't strong enough or important enough to you to end up like Kurama or I. What does this mean, though? Naruto asked, watching the mob of hundreds of people shuffling around aimlessly. If they're stuck here, but their powers and their memories are in other parts of the soulscape, what does that mean for us? Yami closed the door and thought a moment. I think I'm starting to understand your semblance a little more, but I need to finish exploring the other corridors. Until we know the full extent of how burden works, we can't know how powerful it is. Naruto nodded as he looked at the door until he turned away from it. Do you still wish for me to continue researching Naruto? Ignoring the pit in his stomach at the thought of the wandering souls inside of himself, Naruto shook his head. No, keep going. If I'm going to keep our family together, I have to be able to take on anything. Now it's just this need to worry about, but we've got Cinder, whoever her boss is, and maybe other people that would try to separate our family. On top of that, we still need to find Blake and bring her back. I need to become stronger for the clan. Please learn everything you can, Yami. The purple-eyed strategist nodded his head. Of course, Naruto. I will do my best. I have to keep Kurama and you from doing anything stupid after all. Despite the words, Yami's small smile showed Naruto the playful intent behind it. Thank you, Yami. Beacon Academy headmaster's office. The clock tower of Beacon Academy doubled as its headmaster's office. Large gears turned on a timer far above the mundane furnishings and paperwork of its usual denizens. Cogs and springs worked intricately, and each cycle of the machinery work produced a distinct tick as 1 second finally passed. This was the white noise that Professor Ospen had grown used to hearing as he did his daily administrative work. One stack of paper he had finished, one he had left to do, and whatever he was currently writing on was in the center. It was linear, constant, and simple, just like time. Professor Ospen himself was a man of tousled gray hair and wide brown eyes. A pair of shaded spectacles hung on the bridge of his nose. Around his neck was a green cowl bearing a cross-shaped pin, while he wore an unzipped black suit over a button vest and green shirt in addition to a pair of long green pants and black shoes. Leaning against his desk was the ever-present cane he was never seen without. As he continued his work, he could hear a rapid clack-clack from the hallway. He knew who it was, so he didn't outwardly react, though he was curious what had Glinda in such a hurry. The semester wasn't starting for a few days yet, so he couldn't be the children. The incident with Summer Rose was days past. If she had felt the need to object, it would have been before now. Perhaps some sort of report had come in. When the clacking stopped and a knock came a second later, the headmaster called for the woman to come in. Headmaster, I have something you must be made aware of. The woman who spoke was a green-eyed woman wearing overall glasses and had her light blonde hair tied in a bun with a curl hanging off to the side of her face. From each ear hung a tear-shaped earring that matched the pendant hanging from her collar. Aside from that, she also wore a long-sleeved white top with a keyhole neckline and gauntlet cuffs tucked inside the high-waist pencil skirt adorned with bronze buttons and black-brown stockings. On her back was a two-colored cape, purple on the inside and black on the outside, which came to just above her bronze-heeled black boots. Glinda, what seems to be the issue? Osmond wondered. It should be interesting to see what she had, regardless of what it was. The woman approached and placed her scroll on his desk, causing the holographic screen to flare up. He noted it was a map of the northwest coast of El that some people call the Red Coast. I don't quite see what I'm supposed to be looking at. Glinda nodded. That's the problem. This is our self-update Grim activity map that updates on the ticks of 30 seconds. The nether concentration of the center nest is decreasing. Osmond didn't allow his eyes to widen, but this certainly surprised him. Now that she mentioned it, he noted that the maps updated while she was talking and the central part of the Red Coast lighted. Even if only slightly, it wasn't necessarily an issue. Part of the Red Coast part per se. It meant that the grim activity of such a violent region was losing sustainability. However, that particular region had remained strong for a long time. The fact that it was losing traction brought on more than a few questions. We have no teams sent to do anything in that area. As far as I know, neither do the other academies or militaries, Osmond commented. If you didn't know about it, it was unlikely that the missions existed. I also doubt that the nest have suddenly started dying off for no reason. We're really only left with one possibility. Glinda nodded as she picked her scroll up off the desk. Something or someone is in the Red Coast killing Grim in such large quantities that we're seeing it on the maps. What should we do, Headmaster? Glinda wondered curiously. Osmond thought momentarily before coming to a conclusion. Send in the scouting party immediately. If we can catch a glimpse of the person or persons responsible for this, then we'll at least have a place to start. He nodded and turned heel, and she nodded and turned heel, already going through the list of possible huntsmen and huntresses to put a team together. Oh, and Glinda, the huntress gave pause, glancing at him. I think you better send a report to this to Crow whenever he comes back on the grid. She nodded and left. Once more, alone with nothing but time and administrative duties, Osmond worked. Red Coast. Kerma felt more alive than he could ever remember. He was covered in nether, which wasn't as warm or satisfying as being covered in blood, but knowing he was killing Grim still gave him such a rush. As his claws gripped through the nether of a Beowulf like a sword through paper, he couldn't help his grin. With his handy combination of first spark and all-seeing eyes active, the pawns couldn't do anything properly besides die. When the alpha pawns started coming to him, he let them. Boris froze the Nevermore where they flew and caused them to crash into several Ursa Major. When the Deathstalker rose up out of the ground in front of Kerma, he didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He killed. Several spears conjured from gravity dust slammed into its exoskeleton and caused it to implode. That grin never left his lips. Why would it? This is what he was created to do. He killed, he slaughtered, he reveled in wiping out the existence of anything that might be an obstacle to Naruto. In this moment, he was reveling more than he ever had before. As Kerma summoned a halberd from hammer space and slammed it into one of the seemingly endless waves of pawns, he found himself near Kisame. Samehada had slammed into the same King Daijutsu, which brought the two face to face. Kisame wore a matching grin to Kerma's. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. It was understood. This was what they lived for, what they breathed for, what they would die for. The thrill of the battle, the thrill of the hunt. The only thing that caused a momentary halt in carving their path through the ocean of black and white was the sound of whirring above them. Glancing up, they could see the bullhead coming to sight. The cargo bay was surprisingly open up until the moment that a familiar maniac jumped out while screaming something nonsensical that strangely sounded religious. Knowing Hidan, it was both. Not a moment after he did, something came out of a compartment under the wings. As Kerma watched, he could see a pair of miniguns emerged and begin firing into the nest. So that's what those two were adding to the bullhead, Kerma thought with a grin, even as Hidan carved a path directly to him. Kurama, what are Lord Uzumaki's orders? He asked with a feverish sort of look in his eyes. The red-eyed persona grinned wilder. Extinction. His response was simple, but it covered everything he wanted, everything he needed. As the three battle maniacs dispersed, Kimaru could only watch with a sigh. Dust, I hope this wasn't a terrible idea. He wasn't referring to the mission. He wasn't referring to grabbing Flounder. He wasn't even referring to fighting an entire nest. He was referring to getting those three together in a single area. Hopefully Naruto and Yami knew what they were doing. Hopefully. End of chapter 11. Shattered Pieces by Orpheus Kidwell, chapter 12. What happened here? The voice was quiet, barely audible, and against the crashing tides and sharp autumn winds, the speaker eyed the enormous pile of nether and bone, amazed at how much carnage he was seeing. Was it possible to feel bad for Grim? He wasn't sure, but the thought definitely occurred to one Professor Peter Port. When Osman had asked him to check on the Red Coast, he hadn't imagined this would greet him. There was so much blight coating the beaches that it was better to rename the Black Coast. He'd been to the coast before and seen the masses of Grim fighting for whatever they could scavenge, even turning on one another to gain strength. To see such a seemingly permanent nest destroyed brought an odd mixture of relief and nervousness, but not fear, to the veteran huntsman. Still, he would need to report this to the headmaster. With that in mind, he adjusted the controls on the small aircraft he used to get here and made his way back to Beacon. This was big. Mount Glen. Naruto couldn't help but stare at them. Honestly, slab of metal was a better way of describing Flounder than sword. This thing was what they destroyed one of the largest nests in Belt to find. There were two wrapped hills on the bottom running parallel to each other, connected to a thick piece of black steel or a similar metal which rose up and curved. Near the top, on either side of the center line that dived left to right, were two holes that mirrored each other in size, shape, and a position that Naruto could probably fit his arm through. Like Zabuza's own headhunter, it seemed like an unorthodox and insane weapon to bring into combat. Its ability seemed to be the saving grace. Laying a hand on one of the handles, he watched as the multicolored and multi-layered aura he called his own was summoned up and formed a shell around the hunk of metal. Using his aura and hand strength, further enhanced by a first spark, he lifted it up. Upon activating first spark, the shell solidified into an electric blue. With some effort, he manipulated the shell and watched as it formed into the shape of a broadsword 8 feet in length. Manipulating it a different way, he watched as the tip flattened and the broadsword changed into some sort of double-ended battle axe. Battle axe became hammer, and then hammer became scythe. Naruto couldn't help but snicker at the thought of using a scythe in battle and stopping channeling his aura. Placing the weapon back on his desk, he leaned back into his chair. Knock, knock. Hearing the sound from his door, Naruto sat a little straighter. Come in, he allowed. As it swung open, he spotted a familiar black pineapple-shaped ponytail. Black eyes regarded the blonde with exasperation, but that was just the default emotion of this particular person, the antlers marking him as a deer fondness. Shikamaru Nara wore a short-sleeved black shirt with a green vest over that and a pair of blue pants with boots. On his waist hung a pair of trench knives similar to the man he was apprenticing to. Hello there, Shika, Naruto greeted. How troublesome. By this point, that was becoming something of a catchphrase of the boy. Still, even though Shikamaru was only 2 years older than him, the raw intellect of the teen was astounding. It was why he was one of Naruto's trusted advisors. Alongside Guren, Zabuza, and Sasori, Shikamaru happened to excel in terms of strategy and administration when he was interested. That is, ever since your return, Zugetsu has become impossible to do with. You know that. He's become as excitable as he done. Shaking his head, Shikamaru sighed. That isn't why I'm here though. While you were gone, I took care of the thing you wanted. Stepping forward, Shikamaru set a folder on Naruto's desk. The blonde opened it and immediately spotted Ruby Rose's name near the bottom of what appeared to be a roster list. Oh, so you managed to get into their records? Well, if Cinder is this interested in this girl, I need to find out why. Leafing through the papers, he managed to find her school records. So she wasn't actually that great until just over a year ago. It seems that Crow Bronwyn taught her to use as a scythe, and then she started to excel in all the combat areas, though her schoolwork could definitely use some work. Reading further in, Naruto found mention of a sister. Did you get the files of the Xiaolong girl too? The records of every student who is currently going to attend Beacon are in there. Shikamaru stated dully, having known Naruto was like this. Truth be told, there are several people attending Beacon this year you would be interested in. Pira Nikos, the champion of Minstrel's regional tournament 3 years running, is one of them. There's Wai Shni, second daughter of Jackie Shni. Ruby and Yang are both going this year. The first taught by the legendary Crow Bronwyn, and the second by her father, the only slightly less legendary Taiyang Xiaolong. John Ark, one of the last remaining descendants of Julius Ark, is going to be in attendance, though his records look iffy at best. The heir to the Winchester line is going to be there as well. The most important, though, is the second name from the top on the first page. She didn't have any school records, but well, she was in the roster for the next semester. As Shikamaru named several people, Naruto became more and more interested about the newest class of Beacon's freshmen. When he told him where to find the last name, he couldn't resist. The silence in the room was only broken by the sound of the stack of papers falling to the ground as he read it. Nissan? Beacon Academy, headmaster's office. Gathered within Ospin's office were himself, Glinda Goodwitch, and Professor Port as he finished giving his report of his findings at the Red Coast. Both Professor Ospin and Goodwitch were experiencing various degrees of strong emotions as he explained his observations. The Red Coast is destroyed. One of the nests. Port shook his head. All of them. Glinda asked in shock. At the man's nod, she looked from the veteran professor to Ospin, trying to decipher what was going through his head. The man who she worked for never lost his calm, and this was no exception, but he still seemed a bit on edge after hearing it. Those nests were each at least level 4 threats on their own, let alone together. I don't know what we're dealing with, but it is strong, it is swift, and we must remain vigilant. Taking a sip of his mug, Ospin searched for his thoughts. Whatever it is, or perhaps they are, seem to harbor ill will towards the Grim, or perhaps they just wanted to clear the Red Coast for their own purposes. Either way, we need to be prepared. With the coast cleared, it does offer us an advantage, though. We don't have to worry about those nests. Vale is a little safer with it gone, so we will take full advantage of the situation. What are your orders, headmaster? Professor Port inquired. He waited for his employer to finish taking another drink of his mug. He had been at Beacon long enough to know the headmaster used his mug as a way to figure out what he was going to say. Whatever Ospin dictated, he would do his best to ensure it happened. Inform the others that the nests are dispersed. Inform the council that the Red Coast is cleared, and Glinda convinced them to fund settlement efforts there. If we do not clear the land while we can, new nests may pop up. I also want Professor Oblick to study the area, see what we can find. We don't have anything substantial, but he's performed forensic miracles before. I'm sure he'd love to solve this mystery, or the one pertaining to the Red Coast origin, if nothing else. If only this had happened a few weeks back. We have several classes starting in a few days, he sighed, but shook his head. I'll have someone qualified to temporarily replace Oblick while he works. I don't trust anyone but him to figure this out. Of course, headmaster, if that's all, I'll take care of it. Saluting the headmaster and deputy headmistress, he made his way out of the office. After the veteran made his way down the hall, Glinda turned to her longtime boss. Professor Ospin, what do you think this means? It can't be her, but I don't think the tribes are competent or unified enough to pull this sort of thing off either. Raven isn't even interested in the coastline, and she's the only one strong enough to pull all of them together for something this big. The Fang aren't strong enough for this sort of thing either. Ospin looked into the murky brown liquid within his cup and seemed to be thinking. To answer your question simply, Glinda, I don't know. The White Fang doesn't seem like they'd be interested in that territory. The tribes would sooner take what belongs to others than build their own settlements. All we can do is take advantage where we can so that Salem can do the same. There may be a new player, but that doesn't mean we can take our eyes off our true opponent. Glinda seemed to hesitate a moment before she nodded once. Shall I continue the preparations for the new semester until my time in front of the council comes? Ospin nodded before taking another sip of his coffee. With that, the woman walked out, leaving Ospin alone once more. Looking down at the paperwork in front of him, the man set his mug down. There was always more paperwork to do. No matter what happened outside the school, it was constant. Just like time, he would attend to it as he always would, until someone won, no matter who it was. Mount Glen, Public Library. Naruto found himself severely distracted all day after Shikamaru revealed the files to him. There were so many interesting people attending Beacon in the next few days, but he didn't care about any of them. He was far more interested in his Nissan and the girl who had saved him emotionally, where Adam had saved him physically. Blake Belladonna was going to be attending Beacon. After so long without her, he'd finally found out where she was going to be. What was he supposed to do though? Thoughts were swirling around in his head like a violent whirlwind. More importantly, the spawns of that demon who employed Dr. Orochimaru will be there. Let's kill her and cause him as much pain as we can, Kurama growled from the triumvirate council room. Naruto ignored that part of himself for now, knowing that letting Kurama out couldn't end well. There may be useful people among these new recruits, but we have no way to contact them. We need to hold off on any action until we have more reliable information. Screw that. We could just waltz in there and rip that little bitch's throat out, send her head back to Jackus as a warning. Then we can go for him when he's terrified and take everything he owns. Just need semblance wouldn't be a bad idea to snatch up either. Now that I think about it, it's a win-win. Trust me. Trust you right now, trust you right as well as we walk into something even we can't heal from. Maybe just be quiet so Naruto can think, you idiot. The blonde found himself pacing back and forth through his room as his other personalities had their own back and forth. He only stopped when someone grabbed his hand. Looking at the bed where the person sat, he saw Neo's eyes had become a soft white color. If you remember correctly, that was Neo. Naruto, you need to relax, she exclaimed softly, her voice barely a whisper, but he could still hear it. When those white eyes shifted to pink, he knew Bri was back out. If you don't, it'll be harder for me to keep myself restrained from finding your sister and doing terrible things to her. No one hurts my love. Seeing the look in Neo's eyes, Naruto allowed himself to be pulled closer. He sat on the bed next to her, even as the older girl pulled his head to her lap and started stroking his blonde locks. He wasn't sure who she was trying to calm. I just don't know what to do, Neo, he admitted. It's been so long since I saw Nissan. I didn't think I'd ever see her again. Even if I did see her, I have no idea what I would tell her. Kurama and Yami aren't being any help either, and it just makes me so confused. The last time I was this confused was looking up at the girl. He found himself blushing as he thought about that time on the rooftop with her. Neil seemed to smile at the thought and leaned down, getting way too close, kissing him for a moment. She grinned at his reaction. He was just too adorable. Finally, she spoke. We'll just have to go find her when she goes to Beacon, won't we? Naruto's raspy voice seemed a bit less strained as she spoke, and her smile was downright mischievous as she spoke. I hope you can figure out what you want to say by then. It's going to be a family reunion you won't forget. Naruto turned to face her way, looking off to the side. Thank you, Neil. I really appreciate it. He couldn't see it, but Neil was smiling softly as she softly stroked his hair. Anything for my love. Anything. End of chapter 12.